Question: what's the best thing in the world? Yes, it's chocolate. That's why I started a chocolate shop, which turned into a bakery, but that will have to be another video. What do you know about chocolate, though? Do you know what it goes through before we get to play with it? Guess it's time to learn. This guy in Roatan, Honduras did as good a job as I've ever heard explaining the basics of chocolate, so he's going to start things off.
Where the magic happens. This is where we make all of our chocolate. We're actually the biggest chocolate factory in Honduras. We don't have commercial chocolate companies here like Lindt or Hershey's. They're all family-owned, locally operated companies like ours, and we just happen to be the biggest. The mission is obviously to create the best chocolate in the world, but beyond that, we have a mission with the environment and with the indigenous communities who harvest our cacao. We get our cacao from La Mosquitia, which is a region located in the northeast part of the mainland, so not here on the island. It's a World Heritage Site that's full of harpy eagles, jaguars, white-lipped peccaries, tapirs. All these animals live in La Mosquitia, and since the 1700s, there's been a big problem with the clearing of trees.
Let me just
in the
interject
area.
to mention that cacao is grown in tropical regions. It likes to be part of an ecosystem with canopy trees above and lots of bugs to pollinate. Also, cacao began first in Central America, like 3,000 years ago at least. And that's where most of the really good chocolate still comes from, even though most of the commodity chocolate that's bought up by Cargill comes from Africa now.
As the only sustainable source of income in the area. So people there are involved now in cacao harvesting. So that's the strongest trade now in order to support their livelihoods, but at the same time protect the environment. So this is where we get our cacao from, guys. And just so you know, it's wild grown in the area, and only 2% of the cacao in the entire world is wild grown. 98% of it is grown in farms. And 60% of the cacao in the world today is coming from Africa. So that's because all these companies, commercial companies, they want to sell $1 chocolate bars, right? And they're interested in volume, not quality. So they're getting these from where it's cheaper to grow. Farms in Africa happen to be the cheapest, so that's where they do it. But if you're getting cacao from secluded regions, jungle areas like La Mosquitia, obviously your bar is not going to be $1, right? And it's going to be more expensive. Just like ours is $5 here, but in New York, San Francisco, they go for like $13, $15 because it's really rare cocoa beans that make our chocolate.
What he's talking about is there's a very big difference in the beans. In Africa, they're not growing the fine flavor beans. They're growing the hardier beans that can withstand weather and disease better. Chocolate has gone through several pandemics over the years, and the reason chocolate prices have gone up so much in the last 15 years has been droughts in Africa. Historical oversimplification of chocolate genealogy has left us with 3 classifications of cacao beans. Criollo, meant to be the best native cacao, and the variety is still found in the coolest places like Venezuela, about 1% of the total worldwide harvest probably. Forastero, they're lumping in basically all the commodity market beans. Numbers contradict each other, but most people think it's 85-90% or more of the market. And then Trinitario, a hybridization that may or may not have happened on the island of Trinidad. And then there's lots of variations among them, and a lot of the Forastero beans are turning out to be really good ones too, like the Nacional bean in Ecuador, classified as a Forastero but recognized as a world-class bean, and others.
Our chocolate. This is a cacao pod. I don't know if you've ever seen one before, but that's how it looks when it's ripe and ready to be harvested. It grows directly on the trunk of the tree, and it's very rare, majestic looking. The Maya people thought of it as the food of the gods. A scientific name became the food of the gods in the Greek language, which is Theobroma cacao. And not only was it thought of the food of the gods because it's majestic looking, but also because it's the highest source for iron in the world. It has more calcium than cow's milk, 40 times more antioxidants than blueberries. It's a natural sugar regulator. So people who suffer from diabetes, they're recommended to eat cacao.
Anyway.
So the first thing we have to do is we get the pod from the tree and we cut it in half. You're going to find about 50 beans inside. We scoop them out. We throw them inside wooden boxes, cover them with banana leaves, and they stay there for like 5 days. They ferment. That pulp that it has naturally ferments the beans because of the sweetness. Then they're brought into drying stage. They're dried between 5 and 15 days. It really depends on how many times the sun's coming out. Then they send them all the way from the Mosquito area, right? All the way to Honduras. And the first thing that we do here is roast the beans. So this is what they look like after they've been roasted. I'm gonna send them along, and if you guys want, you can grab one and you can try it, okay? I'll try one, just so you're not scared, okay? All right. All right, guys. Here. So, the next step is to separate the outer shell from the inside of the bean. The outer shell is edible, but it has a lot of fiber. Fiber is good for us, but not for chocolate making, because chocolate bars have to be soft, have to be creamy, they have to melt in your mouth. So fiber is no good for that. So we remove it, and we can use it as compost or for cacao tea. We bag it here and we sell it as cacao tea. Now, the inside is what we need for making chocolate. So how do we get the inside? We throw the beans inside of a machine called the winnower, which breaks them. Then they go through a funnel. A vacuum sucks the shell because the shell weighs less, and the inside just drops into a bucket. That's called winnowing. They do that in agriculture with wheat and corn to separate the husks from the inside. And then we end up with the inside, which is called cacao nibs. This is what we use to make dark and milk chocolate. Inside of cacao nibs, you're going to find 56% oil, 44% solid. The oil is called cocoa butter. You guys ever heard of cocoa butter? Yeah. If you ever wondered where white chocolate comes from, why it's white, if it's real chocolate or not, well, let me tell you, it's real. It's not healthy like dark chocolate because it comes from the fat of the bean. It comes from cocoa butter. So white chocolate is not healthy like dark chocolate, but it's delicious, right? Anyways, that's 56% of the bean. And the solid part of the bean is cocoa powder. That's where cocoa powder comes from. So these two ingredients come from inside of the bean. Now, if we want to create white chocolate, we have to separate in order to use the cocoa butter to make white chocolate. But if we want to create milk or dark chocolate, we just grind the nibs. Right? The nibs get ground, and then they become a paste, not a powder, because it's mostly oil inside of them. Just like peanuts, they become peanut butter, not powder, right? Because of the oil inside. So that oil is called cacao liqueur, and that is the base for chocolate. Cacao liqueur goes into a refiner. Here's where we have the sugar. Here's where we have the milk powder. And we refine cacao liqueur for 24 hours here at our factory. Some companies do it for more days and some even for weeks. Here, when you add the sugar to cacao liqueur, it changes into chocolate liqueur. So that's how you create chocolate, by adding sugar to cacao liqueur. Now, the next step is to transfer the chocolate liqueur into a tempering machine that takes chocolate through highs and lows in temperature. That aligns the molecules inside of the chocolate into layers. It's a chemical process that happens in order to protect chocolate from fermentation, further discoloration, and also to align those molecules and give chocolate its famous snap. Chocolate has a snap because it's tempered, meaning that those molecules are aligned. And in order to do that, we have to add more cocoa butter in the tempering stage. If we don't add more cocoa butter, we would not be able to temper chocolate, which means that if we put it in the fridge, it won't solidify. It would come out as a paste. And we want chocolate bars, so we have to temper it. This machine is what allows us to separate cocoa butter and cocoa powder from inside of the bean. Before the invention of this machine, which was in 1817, chocolate bars didn't exist because we couldn't have cocoa butter before this machine. So we couldn't have possibly added back into the tempering stage. Hence, chocolate bars didn't exist before that machine. This machine was invented by a chocolate, he was a scientist named Conrad van Houten. He was a Dutch guy. His father actually invented it, but he patented it. Anyways, 27 years later, fried chocolates in Europe, thank you, sir, which became Cadbury, created the first chocolate bar in the world. That was in 1838. And then Lindt, you know Lindt? Yeah. They created punching machines, refiners. And they made chocolate very soft and very creamy, so it became even more appealing. Right, and the rest is history. Then they added a lot of sugar to it, and now it's not healthy for you. Now it's a candy. Yeah, which is not true, right? Whenever it was first found by the Spanish here in the New World, chocolate, specifically cacao liqueur, right, was added into boiling water. The Maya people would add spices to it and drink it after they had a headache or a stomach ache because it was medicinal. So when they brought it back to Europe, the Spanish, they actually sold it in pharmacies. For the first 2 centuries in Europe, only the royals had access to it, and they were sold in pharmacies after that. It wasn't until Conrad invented his machine that chocolate became more readily available because people could start making chocolate from cocoa powder instead of making it from the bean, which was really expensive. So you know, that's how it trickles down into what it is today. Then after tempering chocolate, we pour it into a mold. The mold goes on top of a vibrating machine. Any idea why we do that? Correct. Get the air bubbles out. You guys are good class. So we put the molds inside of the refrigerator where the chocolate solidifies. Takes about 30 minutes to start chocolate, like an hour. If it's milk or dark, we bring it out, we pop them out of the molds, we hand wrap them, and they're ready to go.
Okay, the history lesson won't be on the test, but it will be good for you to know the steps of making chocolate. Step 1. Move to the tropics, plant trees, wait 5 years. Then when they're ready to come off the trees, they go into a box and they ferment for a few days, and then they dry in the sun for a few more days. Here I am jumping in at that point at the smallest possible scale and with barely any tools on a hobby farm in Ecuador. I did not get to visit the production farm because I caught myself a lovely case of COVID.
Si vas a hacer así, ¿cómo se vuelve?
And now here's a minute or so of a chocolate factory in Dominica and the equipment they have.
Takes it to the window. So whenever you put on the vacuum, you pulse it here, goes down, sucks up the skin, and the heavier pieces of cocoa falls into this. And the skin
blows away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
So it's like a separation.
Okay.
So after it's been roast, pass through the breaker and the window. That's what we get.
So that's cocoa nibs, basically.
Yeah. Nibs and skin.
Yeah, and skin. The skin is still in there.
Yeah.
So that hasn't gone through here yet.
Yes, it has,
has gone
but
through.
then the machine does not take off all the skin.
Okay.
So we take the balance, take it off manually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever you put the nibs, the pieces of nibs,
Yeah.
put it in the mixer. At the same time, you add the different flavors, ingredients, and sugar.
Sugar.
You have to grind it into a paste.
Okay.
And if it's all cocoa butter, it melts into the beans and it all becomes a liquid.
Okay.
Now this has
For
to
how
go
many days? How
from
long?
3
Yeah.
to 4 days non-stop.
Okay.
And with the friction, it warms it to a certain temperature. Now there's a different stage called tempering. Tempering is to get the right crystal form of chocolate, because chocolate can have 6 types of crystals,
Yes.
but you only choose one particular kind, and this is what you put on the vibrating table. You fill the molds, it vibrates. That's when you get a natural form of chocolate. If it's not tempered at all, that's how it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that before. Then we get our hands on it in all its forms. Cocoa nibs, cocoa powder, dark milk and white chocolate, plus unsweetened chocolate, which they would call chocolate liquor. He called it liqueur. Most people call it liquor. And the stuff that we use to coat brownies and bacon with, which has the cocoa butter replaced by hydrogenated palm kernel oil for health reasons. No, so it doesn't need to be tempered. Speaking of tempering, watch for another video to come out to teach you how to temper and dip and mold chocolates at Carter's. Thank you for falling asleep to my video.